Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting, and we are talking Sandman Volume 2 tonight. And I got my Sandman crew with me tonight, and we are actually full. We got Jennifer, Comics Will Break Your Heart. What's going on?
Hello. Here to talk Sandman.
Ready to talk Sandman? Nice. We got Unruly Simeon. What is happening, my friend?
I can't call it, brother.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And then we actually have our last member of our crew who unfortunately had to miss our first one, but we got Comic Congress NYC who hasn't been on the channel in a minute. What is that?
I haven't been on YouTube in like a year. So
well, this is true.
Well, more like 2 months, but that feels like a year when you're like a content person and you don't do anything for a while. But my life's been on fire recently, not the good kind of on fire.
Not like Alicia Keys.
Yeah, not that kind, unfortunately. So I haven't been that active, but and then I got sick and other stuff happened, family stuff. So it's been a minute, but this is a book I've read multiple times, so I'm always happy to go back and reread it.
Yeah, and this was when you were like, back when I started the show, you were like, whenever you do Sandman. So we had to have you on this.
Sorry to miss the first episode. I do have like a bullet point version of my thoughts about.
So we were going to start with that. So let's hear your hot takes. You said you got hot takes.
Well, I didn't say that. I never promise hot takes.
You were literally backstage and you're like, I want to start a fight with my opinions about Sandman Volume 2.
Only if it's with Unruly, because, because I think maybe Unruly and I disagree about certain things, but not necessarily that extremely, especially regarding some of the art. Because I know that was a good chunk of the first episode's first half of the discussion, like the first 30 minutes or so. But anyway, my quick take thoughts on Volume 1. Let me first precede that by saying that the first time I read Sandman was when I was in college, like in earnest. I know that there was a joke by J Hood last time about people reading Sandman in college or whatever, and that being like a trope. And for me, it was a trope. I had read a couple of random single issues before college, but I didn't really understand how continuous the story was prior to reading it properly in college. So I thought it was just like a pure anthology series before that, for whatever reason. Like it was like you could just read any issue and you'd be fine. Like, and in a way you sort of can, but I think after a while it's like, well, you miss a lot of dots that get connected by Neil Gaiman. So, but anyway, in college, and then I later reread it as an adult, appreciated it way more as an adult. I think, I say adult, like when you're in college, you're still like a baby, really,
I'm still a baby.
Yeah, I still feel like a baby too, but I appreciated it way more that time, that second read. And a handful of times since then, I've revisited it. Didn't always finish it every time I revisited it. So I think this might truly be my third time in earnest reading it from issue 1 to the final issue, because there were other times during rereads where I skipped around a little bit and kind of, just pick and chose what I wanted to read over the course of the run. But overall, one of my favorite books. Neil Gaiman is an absolute goat, genius. From a writing standpoint, like he's on the Mount Rushmore of comic book writers, especially like the last 30 years of comic book writers, and all fiction writers, really. So I just love the way that he can seamlessly weave like extended DC continuity with classic literature and mythology, but also bring like pure straight up genius originality to it. Somehow he can combine those 4 quadrants. I don't know many writers that could do that. So for me, that's just kind of like, it starts with him and the rest, it all emanates from that. From an art standpoint, which was a big topic of discussion, I think I, for the most part, agreed. I think like Jen was saying that the McKean covers are by far, like from an art standpoint, the most impressive thing that materialized from the whole book. Volume 1, especially because some of those covers are just iconic, classic covers at this point. I would have to say that issue 8 cover is my favorite from the Volume 1 covers. It's absolutely iconic. Doesn't have the character that, obviously because these were collage, mixed media kind of abstract pieces that McKean did, it didn't. Yeah, I think it's in there. It's in that stack, right? I sent all my Sandman keys to CGC. They're on the way back from grading. Actually, I should get them like early next week, I think. So hopefully, or late this week, we'll see. But yeah, I would say issue 8 was my favorite. I prefer interior issues from volume 1. I prefer the Dringenberg art over the Sam Keith art. I think the interior art for issues 7 and 8, I think for me were my favorites from volume 1. And then I think the one thing from volume 1 that, or not volume 1 or the whole series really, that I don't think you guys talked about, which is one of my favorite aspects of the book, is Todd Klein's lettering. Like Todd Klein's for some reason lettering is a big thing for me in my experience reading comics. Like for me, it's like an actual piece of the art itself, right? In a way. And Todd Klein's lettering is absolutely genius. Like the way he presents the speech bubbles for Dream, like that's iconic within itself. Just the speech bubbles for Dream and the font that's used for Morpheus's speech throughout the whole series, to me, is Sandman. And then the use of like bolding words in regular dialogue. Like I don't think I remember seeing that approach prior to me reading Sandman. Like I don't know the first letterer whoever did that or whatever, but Todd Klein really kind of stood out for me, and Sandman in general, as far as lettering, is one of my favorite lettered comic stories of all time. So those are just some quick thoughts. I don't think any of those were hot takes from volume 1. So now we're caught up. Volume 2.
Right. So let's get everybody's thoughts on volume 2. Let's start with Jen this time. What did you think on the reread of volume 2?
Yeah, I know I mentioned this just like a pinch backstage, but having like this is the first time that I'm going back to the Sandman and reading it very seriously. And the thing that has been striking me the most is that I remembered so much more from volumes like 3 and on. Like I remember this because I was growing up and living in Florida, and a big part of this storyline takes place in Florida. So I'm like, okay, I do remember that. But so many of the other parts, I remember the family dynamic, and we really don't get to see a lot of the family in this. We get to see them a little bit later on, and that becomes a much like more like a bigger part of it. There's also some moments in here that are deeply I don't want to necessarily say controversial, but there are moments in here where there's a lot of violence that happens. There's violence throughout the whole book, but because, spoiler alert, there's a moment where there's a serial killer convention that's happening. And so you literally have 10 different serial killers kind of all talking about what they're doing. And so that becomes a plot point. And so I had forgotten about that. And I'm like,
did anyone else expect to see actual bowls of cereal the first time they were reading it? Like that wordplay like escaped me. Like definitely the first time. I'm like, okay, there's a cereal convention.
They call themselves the cereal convention in order to hide that it's like a.
Eventually during the issue, I was like, okay, no, there's going to be no cereal.
Yeah. So
that was I lived off of that in college.
I definitely forgot how violently horrific this gets. So that was a kind of a shock for me going back and rereading this. I do have to say, I think that knowing what happens, this isn't my favorite volume. Even though it has one of my favorite issues. The Shakespeare, or not the Shakespeare issue, because the Midsummer Night Dream is later, but this one where it has
the every 100 years.
So that's one of my favorite issues out of the whole series. So I'm glad that we got to revisit it. But overall, this is probably not one of my favorite volumes.
Okay. Before we go any further, I just realized I hadn't shouted out the chat yet. So we had GTQ hanging out early. As always, he and Unruly are always early. So John was in here early. He actually was talking on his Instagram today about reading Omnibus 1 of Sandman. So Phil is in the house. What's going on, Phil?
Yeah, so why isn't John here talking about it?
Because
he's read it before.
Not to have anybody on more
hasn't read it before?
And he's on Black Hammer, so
has he not read it?
I don't think so, no.
Oh,
he just read it.
I kind of just assumed he would have.
Well, he said he'd read like a couple of the first 2 trades, I think, and then now he's going back and reading the whole thing. So, you guys are of course in here. Kenneth Bird's in here. Black Swamp Comics in here. What is going on? So, Unruly, your thoughts on Volume 2, just in general here before we dig into the details.
I remember the very first time I read it, I thought that the serial convention was a little too coy, on the sign. But and all right, this violence, it wasn't like that the diner issue from the first volume.
By the way, you guys hated that issue. I know Gore Vidal loves that issue. I felt somewhere in between on that. Well, that was issue 6, right, from volume
Speaking
1.
of which,
there's Gore.
I knew he had to be here.
Yeah, serial convention was amazing.
I don't like. Just let me finish. I don't like pointless violence, where this. At least these people are motivated. They've got a raison d'etre. But I love Fiddler Green. He's such a cool character. Yeah. And
Gilbert.
Yeah.
Freaking the issue where Sandman hooks up with the guy every 100 years, Hob.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites too.
I think that's the standout issue in this volume.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, Kavi, what about you? What do you think of Volume 2? Just in
I guess similar to what Jen said. I mean,
okay.
I do think I think maybe this was a backstage conversation, but for this whole book, every volume to me kind of gets progressively better and better. The middle volumes, like that we're about to get to, like 3 through 5, are kind of my favorite, I would say. But the end of the book is good too. But that doesn't necessarily mean I didn't like this volume per se. I think there was several issues that I liked. The whole concept of the dream vortex was a little high concept to sort of wrap my head around at first, and some of the execution around the dream vortex concept got a little confusing, especially as it related to Jed Walker and Rose and Unity, and she was supposed to be the vortex. Like, I got some of those like little minutia details, like similar to what Jen said. Like, it's harder to remember that after years go by, and it's like in many ways, every time I reread volume 1 and 2, I'm kind of experiencing it again for the first time. Like, I know I've read it before, but every time it's like, okay, I got to redigest these first 16 to kind of kick us off in this whole crazy adventure. But I actually quite like this volume in comparison as an overall volume. In comparison to volume 1, I prefer, I like this more, but I think the book just keeps getting better. So I don't want to, I don't want to do spoilers or anything.
Oh, well, we're going to do spoilers here in a second. But
well, for volume 2, but not for the future.
Yeah, for later stuff.
Yeah.
So I did not like this as much as volume 1.
Okay, interesting.
The whole Rose Vortex thing never really like hooked me. I was never really that interested in her character. Some of the stuff around her was a little more interesting. The serial convention, I felt like, didn't we just do this with the guy in the diner and like in the Corinthian? I don't know. Like, the Corinthian didn't really intrigue me that much at this level. I love the issue with Hob where he's going back. Like, that issue maybe is my favorite issue of the series so far. Like, but overall, the volume as a whole, I did not. It was fine, but it didn't like Rose and the Vortex stuff never really registered with me in a way that I was like, I didn't really care what happened to her. And so it was kind of like, so I had trouble with that part of it because in her and her brother, and like, it was just, I don't know, it felt like it got down this loop of more violence, and I'm like, that like didn't necessarily seem necessary. Right. And maybe it is later, maybe he pulls it around, but it felt like, oh, we started down this ultraviolet thing with the serial killer in the diner, and we're going to just do more of that, but not as, I don't know, it didn't work for me on several parts of it didn't work for me. But the issue, like you guys have talked about, which I forget which issue it is now. It's
13, but I
13. Yeah, the one where he's him and Hob revisit. I love that issue. I thought
that was 13.
I think that what not the, I think what threw me off with that storyline or that arc, and maybe it's almost true of like some of the things in the first volume, is that it feels like it's throwaway. Like
Right.
it feels like a lot of parts of it are inconsequential. I mean, there are some things that will come back up from this volume, but some of it does feel inconsequential. And so it's like, wait, why did you add that? Almost like you said, the issue in the diner. It's like all of that felt throwaway. But I mean, some of it, like, I don't know, we'll see like echoes of that maybe later on.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things that I think that I had read the book American Gods after, I think I forget where I read American Gods by Neil Gaiman in my read of Sandman. And this book in particular, because he's like traveling through America, it feels echoing of American Gods, which was written after this or published after this, I should say. So I'm like, oh, did Neil Gaiman get the ideas for American Gods while writing this?
I just like for
I haven't
me,
read American Gods yet. I need to get
Yeah,
that.
I haven't read that yet either. But
Really quick, it's basically about how gods from like England and other countries came with immigrants as they came over to America, and how these like huge archetypes of characters become like Americanized, and how there's old gods that came with people from these other countries with the immigrants that worshipped them, and then now how there are like new gods like television and drama, and like it's fantastic. So anyways, I felt that in this.
my problem with the Rose thing was the payoff didn't register for me, because it was like the setup that he was like, oh, there's a vortex and I'm going to watch her and we're going to do this and we're going to serve her, and then it just comes to, well, I always have to kill you, and it's like, well, wait, then why did we follow her around and try to help her for like 5 or 6 issues? And
Well,
and maybe it makes sense later, but for me that just didn't work like here at this point in the story. So we'll see.
Right.
I mean, go ahead.
Speaking of that, I did love how whenever, because there's this moment, spoiler alert, y'all, there's this moment where she falls asleep, and then you have to turn it sideways in order to start reading
love
that.
Yeah.
Normally, I hate books that are done like sideways, any untraditional. There's very, very few like issues of books or stories that are in non-traditional like comic book style that I enjoy. And I loved that like she's dreaming, they go into her dream, realize that she's the vortex. I loved that. I did love that part of that issue.
I'm a huge sucker for vertical double page spread for some reason, like in comic art. It's just, I love it. Like they're definitely inconvenient while reading it in a way, but art wise, it's amazing. Love it.
Well, and here's the thing, JP. It wasn't pointless, Dream following in her around and protecting her. You got to remember, Dream, out of all the Endless, is probably, well, maybe Death is a little better than him at, seeing humans for what they are and empathizing with them to a degree. But he's one of the Endless.
Right.
I mean, our human concerns really don't matter to him. And I don't think he's being what we would call ruthless or cruel deliberately, but he'll take those actions in a heartbeat. It's his job. It's what he's got to do.
Yeah. Well, I just like the logic behind like why he was like, because it for me it just portrayed it as that like it was, oh, this has the vortex, she has potential, like there was going to be some other payoff, and then in the end it was like, no, the vortex just always has to die. And it was
well,
like,
I know we're kind of skipping around here story wise, talking about the ending, but that's great because I think that's one of the better parts of this volume for me is like I felt that I've also read the rest, so it's a little different. But the way I understand it is that the dream vortex thing is a concern for Morpheus because there was a whole other world that was lost to the dream vortex. Right. And therefore, the solution that he had stuck in his mind is that if this ever happens again, I mean, obviously he was in captivity for 70 years and, a lot of things changed for him in captivity that affected the way he acts. But my understanding was that was like hardwired as the solution to that he must take care of moving forward, and the way and why it's kind of so important, why it's like directly relatable to the rest of the Endless, and especially in this volume, in this case, Desire, is because Desire was the one that raped Unity Kincaid, planted the baby, created the whole vortex transition thing, and Desire's plan, because Desire and Dream don't get along, like it was Desire's plan to create this like mastermind strategy to have Dream attack a kin of the Endless in Rose Kincaid, but ultimately Unity Kincaid re-entered the dreaming, and that whole like heart transfer thing, like I didn't quite I'm not going to pretend I can explain that, but it's like it's high concept, and I just believe it and move forward.
But for me, the payoff wasn't like the explanation and the payoff of it didn't work because like he doesn't figure it out like until like after it's, I don't know. It was just like, I don't know. For me, it just didn't work. And I mean, I guess that's all I can say is it just didn't work. So
fair enough. I think it might work better for you
as you read forward, maybe.
Yeah.
So, well, let's jump back to the beginning here because we did just kind of spend a bunch of time on the end.
Exactly.
So the first issue of this is kind of a standalone. It kind of goes back to the person that we saw before, the lady that was his love that was enduring endless torment.
Nada.
And we get, I forget what her name was. It Nala?
Nada, yeah, Nada.
Nada. And we get her backstory, which was interesting, but it was just odd the way, like, they passed down the story was odd to me. Like, that would just seem like the reason for that seemed odd. But we do get her backstory. Kyle, we'll start with you. What do you think of her backstory?
Which part specifically, like as far as like her falling in love with Morpheus and like,
well, just in general, and then like if there's specific points you want to make, you can jump into those too. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I thought it was a cool sounding tale. I like how they kind of kept it open ended, or they created this sort of doubt in your mind at the end of the tale based on perspective that men tell it this way, but women probably tell it a different way, and that you don't get to hear that right now or whatever. And I like the way that kind of just was framed up. I thought there was kind of some gruesome components to that story that like that after not reading for a while you like forget some of those moments, and then they pop up on screen, if you will, and you're like re-shocked all over again, like there's a rock involved and stuff. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I have every single beat memorized. I'm not looking at it right now. But I think for me, the whole vibe of that storytelling, between was it an uncle and a nephew, or was it
I think an uncle and a nephew. Yeah,
it was an uncle and a nephew. I like that. I don't know. I think when I was reading some other books, like some more recent comics, a lot of times this issue like randomly pops up into my head when I'm reading some other comics, like East of West, for example. Because I read Sandman obviously well before I read East of West, but while I was reading East of West, this issue like constantly kept popping up in my head for some reason.
I love East of West, but I've never made that connection before. But you're right, like with the way the story is told, like it's like poetry to me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's how this felt. So I never made that connection, even though these are like East of West and Sandman are probably two of my favorite series.
So good. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was enough thoughts.
Yeah. You can say as much or as little as you want. Not any of this.
No, I mean, I think some of the other parts of the issue also like kind of stood out for me, like actually learning about the dreams that escaped and stuff like that. With Brute, Blob, Fiddler's Green, Corinthian. Is this the one with Hector Hall, or is that the next issue?
Yeah, no. Well, that's the next issue.
Okay.
Or no, that's 2 issues away, I think. But
Is it okay?
But yeah, just the first issue is literally just issue 9 is just that.
It's just the tail, right? It's just
Yeah,
just the tail. Okay.
So, what about you, Unruly? What did you think of the tale of Nada?
Well, I want to throw a hot take out there that's not really a hot take. So it's something you mentioned. This is how the men tell the story, but the women don't tell the men their version.
Right.
And then in the very first page of the next issue, you meet Desire, who is all things to all people, whatever, you might see them as.
Yeah.
So, that slogan that certain corners of our community like to throw around, go woke, go broke. Ain't no one more woker than Neil fucking Gaiman, baby.
Yeah.
And this was
I would
30
agree with that.
years ago. 30 years ago. You think Neil Gaiman's broke?
No.
Good storytelling is good storytelling. I've read good storytelling from a point of view that I would consider fascist, which I could not agree with less, but it was a good story. It entertained me. I mean, so I don't really know where I'm going with that, so I will be quiet now.
Right.
I love that.
I'm there with you on the sentiment about Neil
Yeah.
and just overall, like, for its time, this was pretty progressive. I think some of the things in hindsight don't feel as such per se, but there's been 30 years, so yeah.
I agree. Like, I think that, today, if this was written, Desire wouldn't be referred to as an it or like he, she, or it.
It would be they, them.
They would be using they, them pronouns, or maybe like am pronouns, like they would be using.
Yeah.
And there's one of, I didn't understand it until like hindsight after like reading it more modernly, but the violence against transsexuals that happens in this, like, there, I think for everything that we get where we're like Neil Gaiman was writing things way ahead of their time, sometimes was there a misstep along the way? Certainly, but I think that there were good intentions behind it. Like a lot of the characters that he wrote about, even though they may be like background characters, were like intentionally queer. Like some of the housemates that we're kind of getting like a little bit forward, but like the house,
we can go wherever you guys want.
Okay.
We don't have to go issue by issue. So
the housemates in this, Rose's housemates, like we have a character who is a queer drag queen who does drag queen shows. Once again, this would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. Certainly they were happening. But there's another group of characters that are coded as queer. I don't know if they're like a friendship sister. So
yeah, I was under the interpretation that they were a lesbian couple, but I wasn't 100% on it.
Yeah, it was a little bit left to the imagination of exactly what their relationship was, but
like they love each other, and I think it's mentioned that they have like a sister-like bond. So I don't. Yeah. So
Right.
like I said, like for every like kind of thing that we get that is today, I think that this would have been written with people openly being queer, having less violence directed towards queer people, like things like that. So, but that's why I think this story drew me in 20 years ago, because it was saying things that some people still don't grasp their heads around
Right.
now.
I have no doubt with the level of genius that Neil is and has, that that he is bringing that all up to date for like 2022 in this Sandman TV show. Like that's I cannot wait.
So excited.
Which is like next month already. It's crazy.
August.
Is that? I had never heard for sure when it was coming out.
It's premiering next month. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've just kind of jumped around. So what other things about this do you guys stand out that you guys want to talk about here?
Well, I mean, I think I brought it up earlier, but I thought the whole Hector Hall thing was kind of funny and cool and interesting, especially for like extended DC lore, like nuggets, Silver Scarab. I don't know if you're familiar with that superhero, but
I am not. But
that's Hector Hall. Like he was the son of Hawkman and Hawkgirl in the Golden Age. So
Yeah.
like pre-crisis. So that's why Hippolyta is in here. Kind of makes sense. Or Lyta Hall, Hippolyta from Wonder Woman, Steve Trevor, uh, lineage, right?
Right.
Pre-crisis DC Golden Age stuff. I mean, there's Infinity Inc. connections there and stuff like that. So I like the fact that they got a little bit that they got like knee deep into some of these more obscure DC characters, and I'll even include the second Sandman, Garrett Sanford, Groot and Glob in there. I'm a big fan of the Jack Kirby, Joe. I mean, I got a published page right there from issue 2 with Groot. Well, I can't even watch it right there.
Oh, okay.
I'll get it later. I'll get it later for show and tell. But yeah, I mean, I geeked out during those issues for some of those Easter eggy kind of things. And Matthew the Raven, by the way, is like also kind of like my favorite character, I think. And the Easter egg behind him is that he was the Matthew in Swamp Thing that Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson did. Matthew Cable, I think. But anyway, yeah, lots of connectivity between like previous DC stories, characters, and paying homage to sort of the history of Sandman that came before it with this whole Hector Hall, Jed Walker was from the original Sandman run, right? Or not the original Sandman, not the Golden Age, but the Simon Kirby Bronze Age run. So there's a lot of connectivity there that not everybody is going to notice, but I appreciate those kind of like geeky things.
Yeah. See, I didn't know any of that. So like I knew that that's what he was trying to reference with some of that, but it didn't necessarily do anything for me. So maybe that's part of why the volume doesn't work as well for me either. So
you mentioned the Swamp Thing, and as a huge fan of Swamp Thing, while reading the story, what is it, issue 3, where we have those where we have the original. This reminded me so much of like original House of Secrets type stuff.
Oh yeah.
And Swamp Thing, I mean that to me just looks like Abigail, but Abby Holland. But yeah, I got huge Swamp Thing vibes from this.
Here's that page with. So this is the splash page to Sandman #2, and you got Glob there, Groot, and then you got the second Sandman. This is the second appearance of the second Sandman. They're in the Dream Dome for the Dream Stream and all that. So,
okay.
Yeah. So all those were referenced in that issue, or in maybe 2 of the issues in this volume, because there were 2 issues in this volume that kind of focused heavily on that side of the storyline. The other part that I quite enjoyed was Groot and Glob explaining like the mischievous plan that they had to create this like corner of the Dream Stream. With I just thought it was hilarious. But I also have a little bit more of a connection to those characters, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I can see that, and I actually I enjoyed some of this. It was just like I don't know. The payoffs for some of this didn't. In this particular volume didn't work, and maybe there's more later. But yeah, the Groot and Glob were entertaining for sure.
They're definitely entertaining, yeah.
What about you, Unruly? What do you think of this whole Groot and Glob and their fake Sandman and this whole little interaction that we get?
Well, I'm like Javi. I love the references.
Yeah.
To the earlier, and it's like the exact opposite of the way they treated Moore with Watchmen. It seems like Neil Gaiman had carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to with these obscure characters.
Yeah.
Because later on, that Kirby Sandman Bronze Age stuff, which was some of the last stuff he did at National.
Yep.
Loved it when it came out. Loved the whole idea, as corny as it is.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see those loop back in.
There's that National Periodical stamp right there on the back of this page.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
75.
And you're going to see a lot of that throughout the whole story. Is him bringing up gold and silver, bronze age.
Some of my
minor
favorite
characters.
parts of this book is those like Easter eggs, character integrations. So.
But unlike you, JP, I really enjoyed the whole Vortex story and how the first time I read it, I was impressed by it, and I didn't see, I'm as dumb as Sandman apparently, Morpheus. I didn't see that it was a plot from Desire.
Well, I mean, they said up at the beginning that Desire's up to something, but like, and I would agree, I didn't see it, but I just felt like it was, and maybe it, like, again, I haven't read the whole volume, but it just didn't come together for me the way I would have liked. So yeah, you can kind of split this into the first half of Rose's story is we get Rose kind of starting to look for her brother, and we find out what's going on with her brother, and we get the Groot and Glob stuff, and then we get the little interlude that we'll talk about. We'll save that for the end, because that was my favorite issue. And then
issue 13, right?
And then we go to the serial killer.
Before issue 13, Jed and the Corinthian kind of cross paths, I believe.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
I love that like scene between them where Jed doesn't know what's going on, but
right
once you see the Corinthian there, it's like, oh, what's going to happen? I mean, Corinthian is by far one of my favorite characters. Also, I mean, he's ridiculously sadistic and crazy, but yeah.
Speaking of the Corinthian, are you currently reading Nightmare Country?
I'm not reading that. I have not dipped my toes into sort of, I guess, post Gaiman Sandman stuff. I haven't, with the exception of like the Death. Well, he was involved with the Death book, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess my exposure to post Gaiman Sandman universe stories is pretty small.
I would say if you like anything with the Corinthian, you should, because right now Nightmare Country is on issue 3 and it's being written by James Tynion. And I haven't been loving it. However, going back and reading this and getting reintroduced to the Corinthian, which plays a big part in Nightmare Country, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go back to issue 1, read that of Nightmare Country, and try to get into it again. What I would also say is that if you liked the Unruly, if you liked the Vortex plotline, I think you would really, really like the Dreaming Waking Hours. That was written in the last couple of years. It's like the last.
Is that the one that Bilquis Evely?
Yes.
Because I love her artwork. Like, I'll stare at the artwork. I don't know what's going on necessarily in the story, but the art looks amazing. So.
Hey, Tacoma and Gus gave me a super chat. Thank you, sir. I much appreciate that. We were talking Sandman tonight and not hot comics, but yeah. The general thing is don't spend your money on them. So that's my general rule. So, but
don't spend your money.
Not on the hot ones. Not in the moment for sure. Okay, so let's talk about the whole serial killer or Corinthian stuff a little bit. Super creepy, but I don't know. Like, it just felt like it was well told, but I don't know. For me, it didn't like.
So are we going to the serial? Are we going straight to the serial convention now, and we're skipping the Shakespeare?
Yeah, I think we do that right at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So yeah. So what did you guys think? So for me, the serial convention was like, I don't know, maybe because we had Dr. Destiny, who was a serial killer in the first one. Like, it just was like, we're going here again. Like, even with the Corinthian, like, I don't know. Like, what did you guys think? What am I missing here about this? Go ahead.
I think Dr. Destiny wasn't necessarily a serial killer. He was just crazy, and he got hold of this great source of power that just made him crazier. My favorite part of the serial convention is, all right, the fat one, I can't remember his name, whose secret place.
Ned Diskin.
Funland?
Funland, yeah.
Yeah. Disney World, right?
Disney World guy, yeah.
I've always thought, long before I read this, how many people walk through the gates of Disney World every day? 200, 300, 400,000?
Yeah.
You take any random grouping of 400,000 people, one of them's going to die. There's a lot of old people that walk into
Statistically.
Disney World. Death has to be a regular occurrence in the park. Do you ever hear about it?
No.
Disney is not going to let that kind of stuff slip.
Well,
So he was
that
very believable to me.
In that scene, on that page, I don't remember if it was a splash page or a panel page, but he's wearing a hat that has like wolf-shaped ears. The original idea was for him to be wearing the Mickey Mouse ears in that scene, but I think Karen Berger, had to cut it, or change it,
You don't litigate against the mouse.
No, yeah, that would have been an instant lawsuit. So you put a serial killer in Mickey ears, they would not have liked that at all.
Well, Gore, that is scary as hell, brother.
I can see that.
Yeah, I've been in places where it's like
I just had a good time, like a bit of a laugh with the whole concept. Obviously, because the cereal pun just got me and continues to get me every time because of that memory of the first read and expecting the cereal and not getting it. Like the cereal and not getting it or whatever. But so I always get like a little bit of a like break to this issue because I just feel charmed by it, I guess. But I think it's hilarious that like they're setting it up like it's a comic convention almost in a way with like panels. You got the female serial killer panel. It's like it's a crazy setup, but I think the overall sort of inciting incident is Rose being attacked, right? Rose being attacked and Fiddler / Gilbert giving her the keys to the dream land, to the dream world, to say by telling her Morpheus's name and call out his name if you need help, and then that kind of connects the dots to drive you to the conclusion of this volume and the rest of the story. So that's the one story beat that I always like take away and always know about this issue without getting into like every page, panel, word or whatever. So it's an important one. But a lot happens in the issue that I forget about pretty much every time. So
I mean, there's just a lot of.
You got the guy pretending to be the boogeyman or whatever.
Yeah, like you got a pretender, and you got what they do to him.
Corinthian kills the fake guy, but he also potentially killed the original guy.
Yeah. He pretty much did. He
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there was that other serial killer that was with them. What was his name? Flay.
They had a bunch of names.
Flay or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then there's the whole family man that never shows up.
Two of the when I was reading this issue, two of the series that I feel like I had kind of a flashback to. One, especially, I think the character design of the Corinthian here, and maybe it's because at the time I may have been reading the two in tandem, like kind of going back and forth, was Preacher. So I got like moments of Preacher in this, but also I never thought of the connection between this particular issue with the serial killers and Nailbiter by, is it Joshua Williamson? I had never so. So like Nailbiter is basically about a whole bunch of like stylized serial killers in Oregon and all over, but it reminded me of that, so I'm like, oh, maybe he got the idea from this issue.
Maybe.
I mean, you also have the sort of the confrontation between Morpheus and Corinthian, which is kind of a pretty epic like scene in its own way.
Because he's like, I created you, so I'm like responsible for you, and that's why I'm going to take it easy. And it's like, I feel like this goes back to maybe volume 1, where there's so many moments where the way that Morpheus punishes people varies so wildly, and where I think his moral like grayness kind of shows up. So I liked that. I liked that part of this issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he destroys him, but he freely admits he takes his skull and he's like, "Well, I'm going to remake you."
He uncreated him.
Uncreated him. Next time you will not be so flawed. And it's like, well, if you're recreating, he's going to be basically the same, or he's something else. Like it just, yeah, that was an interesting decision there. That it's like, well, I'm not done with you yet, but yeah, we're going to uncreate you for now to bring you back under control. Anything else with the serial convention that you guys want to talk about before we talk about the kind of the finale with Rose and the Vortex here, and then we'll circle back to the Hobb issue because it was kind of a different story. So
I can't think of anything.
I mean, we've talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah,
the Rose stuff. For me, I just like the connective tissue of. I don't know. For some reason, it didn't work. I will say that, like, because I didn't talk about it, is Fiddler Green was a fantastic character in this volume.
Yeah, awesome.
Like, I really enjoyed him a lot. I don't know. Obviously, he went back to being a place and not a person at the end of this, so I don't know.
That's why I always remember Gilbert, I guess, because that's the human embodiment that we get to experience versus like the place of the dream or whatever. But I will say, the first time I read it, you don't know that until the end of the volume.
Right.
And every time reading it after that, it gets better knowing that he's Fiddler's Dream. Like it just gets better, like with that knowledge. So I do actually think this volume kind of like has multiple ways to experience it, obviously, depending upon what you know and don't know about the overall story. Like it's different, you know.
For me, I did not register that Gilbert was Fiddler, that he was the other one he was looking for until he told her the name. Until he
I didn't. The first time I read it, same thing. I didn't connect those dots. It was a total surprise to me.
So yeah, it wasn't until he gave her the name that I was like, oh, that's the other guy he's looking for that we haven't seen yet. And all right.
Well, he was laying the eggs, you know, like he knows Morpheus's name. He recognizes the Corinthian in the elevator. Like
that was interesting.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That was a good scene where you're like, why? What's going on here? Like at least when you first read it, you know.
Yeah.
Like, why does he know? And then he pretty much preempts and warns Rose that like she's going to need help. You know?
Yeah. He definitely knew that bad things were going to happen there. Yeah. So. All right. Well, we are 50 minutes in, so we got one issue that we've avoided that I think we all. Did everybody say it was their favorite issue of this volume? I think.
I mean, I would tie the combination of issue 7 and 8 for me, like combine that and turn that into like, because it's really one story.
Oh,
that's
well, yeah,
that's 7 and 8. 15, this is 15, 16, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
The final two issues to me just read like.
Oh, the Vortex?
Yeah, it just was one story, really, to me, or one subsection of the story. I like that, like somewhat unruly. I like the whole Vortex storyline. So that was like the key takeaway for me. So I think I would put that slightly ahead of it. But as a single one issue only, I would say 13 is the strongest within one issue only for me, for sure. It's just really interesting. And it really kind of humanizes Dream in a way.
Yeah.
Because it shows you how like the 70 years in captivity / isolation may have altered his attitude or something a little bit about humanity.
The way it ends.
Yeah, and friendships and all that. I thought it was like it had like this hopeful like attitude to it towards the end, even though a lot of bad stuff happened every 100 years in humanity and society.
So here's my question: Is that Death? Who's taking him?
It's Death.
Is it Death? Okay.
Yeah.
I think in like later iterations, it showed. And I need to go back and look at it. I feel like in later iterations, when we see Death, we see her speech bubbles also changed. Or like in this, we see Morpheus, and he looks like a straight up goth dude there. Yeah. And I think in later iterations, when we see Death in these historical contexts, or like, you know, humanized, I guess, in the human world, we see her as more deathly looking than she is here.
It's like an 8. You clearly can tell she's different from other people when she approaches.
Yeah, like
this, it just looks like a person more.
Yeah.
And
when I first read it, I don't think I realized it was Death, but I don't remember who explained that to me, but I think somebody explained that to me. And then on the first time I ever reread it, I already knew that.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he was with her, I just sort of assumed it was death, but then I was like, well, it could be one of the others we haven't met yet, but it just seemed like death, but I wasn't 100% that that's who it was.
And I think like there's a conversation between them where she's like, okay, I'm going to take him. Oh, I guess like he doesn't want to, like they're having a conversation about the guy. And then like here she says, very well, little brother. And then when Morpheus is having a conversation with the guy, he says something about like, my sister doesn't want you, or like death. I think that he like specifically mentions her saying like, okay, she's not.
Are you going to tell him or I? He's like, it might be interesting because he's talking about he's not going to be stupid enough to die. And Morpheus is like, it might be interesting. She's like, very well. Are you going to tell him or am I? So he doesn't have to thing. So yeah.
I've never seen or read Faustus, which is I think that's the play that Christopher Marlowe wrote. That
is referenced here. Like
is referenced, that is referenced here. So I don't know if there's anything directly from that integrated into this or not or anything, but I just thought that whole sequence was just next level.
Him and Shakespeare and
just like he just powered up Shakespeare to inspire humanity. That's pretty dope.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that Shakespeare couldn't have done it on his own.
Yeah.
Shakespeare, rest in peace.
So for a day or two. So what do you guys think of Hobb? Like, I thought he was super interesting in this. Like, for me, he, like, we've seen him through the ups and downs over the centuries, and even when he's like at his lowest point, and Death's like, so do you not seek do you still wish to live? Do you seek the respite of death? And he's like, he sits there and thinks about it for a second. Are you crazy? It's a mug's game. I'm gonna keep going. Even
you're right. Even when he's at his lowest and like he's lost all his money, he's basically watched everyone that he dies. He's like at a crossroads really and doesn't know what to do. He's like, nah, man. Like, I growing up in the South, like my stepdad had a bumper sticker, and it was like the best day working isn't as good as the worst day fishing. Like that's the mentality that I get here. So like the worst day living is better than the best day. I don't know, whatever that might.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I did think that it was interesting that we see like through his ups and downs where like, okay, he's really rich. Okay. He's really not. He's really like, he's succeeding in life. There is a moment where he talks about becoming a like helping the slave trade. And then like, that's obviously where he ends up making a ton of money. And then Dream is like, yeah, you
not
need
so
to
sure about that.
Yeah.
And you see his regret later.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we got a party crasher. So I don't know which one of you sent him the thing, but we got a party crasher, and I know he's got a show in a minute, so we're gonna drop him in.
I'm ready. We're ready to start the show, right? It's ready
I
to
was
talk
hoping
Sandman.
it was Gore Vidal. Sorry.
I haven't gotten going on here yet.
Is it? Am I a little late?
53 minutes. You're okay.
I'm just kidding. I just wanted to say hi and to tease you guys and to thank you for encouraging me to read this and buy this. So I'm enjoying the chat. I'm just gonna bounce out, but hi guys.
Later. So yeah,
that was me. I'll tell on myself.
Yeah. No, it's okay. John's always welcome here. So, and he's got a show. They're going to be talking about their monthly read here in like 10 minutes. So I don't know if they're on John or White Whale's channel tonight. I'll be honest, but he can put that in the chat. Okay. So, any other thoughts on Hobb that you guys want to get through before we wrap this up? I just enjoy, like you talked about the slavery thing and like how his perspective. You see him and the people around them, like, through the centuries, things that they think are important or not important, and like moving forward, and just the attitude of people, I found super interesting. And the way the way he's changing with the times. He's not the same guy.
And even like I don't know if you noticed, but even the background conversation, like if you go back to where he originally was, and then you see the background conversation that everyone is having, the same background conversation that was being had then is like the same conversation that would be being had in a more modern time.
A dirty joke about a rabbit somewhere, if I recall.
Yeah, like a
500 years later is just as fresh. So
yeah,
I like that. Like it just felt right,
And meeting Johanna
Constantine,
that was pretty cool.
Well, and there's other Constantines that they talk about that they've met through the centuries. So yeah, and they're all a little shady, to put it mildly. So
I don't. So in the new show, Joanna Constantine, it looks like she's going to be featured pretty heavily. Like she's in the trailer for the new show, and I think
I haven't even seen the trailer. I'm kind of like intentionally not watching it, but I probably should.
Yeah.
It looks like verbatim the first volume.
I love Gwendolyn Christie as the choice for that endless character.
I just love her a lot.
Amazing, yeah.
But with Joanna Constantine, when I think that the trailer first dropped or the cast list first got dropped, everyone was like, "What? They're gender swapping John Constantine," and I'm like, "Wait, are they really? Like, I don't remember." Like,
I mean, Neil's definitely woke, but I don't see him going that far. So I think that makes a lot more sense.
The stuff I read was they couldn't use Constantine because the rights are all messed up.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
So that's why they're basically taking this version and then making her like kind of multiple versions.
As like a placeholder for him. And I think that the fact that Joanna Constantine shows up in this where gets some of the immortality, or like she gets some of, like she is featured later on.
Yeah.
So I think that, she's going to show up in this major way. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Unruly.
So ultimately, kind of the end of this is Hobb is like, hey, we're goes to that we're friends, and it like Death is like, no, we're not, and he kind of flees from him sort of when he says that, and then but we get after he's been captive, he's like he's his friend, and like so. You get that change that Gore's been talking about, like the captivity that he accepts that, no, I do have a friend and I do like this person. And that he admits that he looks forward to the meetings every 100 years, which he really hadn't done. So I just thought it was a super clever issue and well done. And for me, so any final thoughts you guys got on volume 2 before we close it out tonight? Tommy, I'll give you first shot at final thoughts tonight.
Well, I mean, if you look at volume 1 as the sort of the mission is to like re-find all of his tchotchkes and get himself back to being, that's the mission of volume 1. The mission of volume 2, like just from a 30,000 foot view perspective, is
clean up the mess,
It's a little bit trickier to summarize, but I would say that like. He's trying to essentially figure out what's causing all these disturbances and then get to the bottom of, the whole vortex thing, right? Like that's the overall main storylines. There's a lot of other things that happen, but at the end of the day, like all those little minutia details, I'm not going to retain, but to me, the core of it was the whole Rose Walker component.
Well, for me, it was twofold. Like volume 1 was, like you said, get his power items back. Volume 2 was kind of clean up the dreaming in terms of like he had escapees and people that were on the loose, and he had to clean that up and deal with the vortex. So there was like the two. Yeah,
it's all. There's a lot of things that are not going right in this one. Yeah, that he has to fix.
Yeah. So Unruly, what are your final thoughts on volume 2?
I think. I love his standalone issues. This one and the one recounting Nada's story. Yeah. I really like that he just drops these in here. And sometimes he'll do it in just a single page.
Yeah, because you could take those out, kind of, and the other issues tell the main story of this volume.
Yeah.
Gaiman is a genius. Everything he's written, I've thoroughly enjoyed.
Nice. Jim, what about you? Any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I know I kind of mentioned it earlier. After like knowing where the rest of the series goes, and maybe it's just me and my memory of where the series goes, where it's like it becomes so much more of a family dynamic. One of the character, like kind of spoiler alert, getting a little bit of ahead of myself, but one of the characters, one of the Endless goes missing. So the family has to like go and find him. And so like to me, like that's the plot point that I remember most about Sandman. And I thought that we were going to get it in this volume. And so I read this and I'm like, wait, we only see Desire and Despair, like those, and I mean like a little bit Death, like those are really the only characters that we see. Delirium gets mentioned. And so I know I said it before, but I feel like this to me isn't one of the strongest overall, but it has one of my favorite issues. Like I love issues like that are just completely different than everything else. So I'm excited to get into the rest of the, like reading this made me excited to get into the rest
I mean,
of it.
volumes 3, 4, and 5 for me, like I think I may have said it at the top, like that's like the best of Sandman for me. Like, I love those volumes. So looking forward to the next one for sure.
Like I finished this and I'm like, I need to immediately pick up the third volume. I mean, I have them all, but I need to like pick them up and reread them again.
I finally got those deluxe hardcovers. Like I've been reading it on trades for years, but I finally got the deluxe hardcover. I need to get like I don't have the strength to read an omnibus or absolute anymore.
I've got the first absolute, or I can't remember if it's absolute or the essential Sandman. I've got one of those, like the I think it's that one. Yep.
Yeah. That's the omnibus or something. Yeah.
They're so purdy.
They are very pretty. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up now. You guys got anything coming up? I guess Jennifer, you have anything you want to promote? Because Kavi has been making content and really almost
I feel like you guys are the active, like good content creators on this show, right? No offense, Unruly, but I think you'll jump in my boat. Here.
But Sunday, I will be dropping a video. I finally completed my high-grade run of Barry Windsor Smith's Conan.
Oh, yeah. You told me about that. Yeah,
it's just going to be me showing them all.
Sweet. I'll look forward to that. That is awesome. All right. Jennifer, what do you got coming up on the channel?
Yeah, so on my channel, right now we're just doing, we missed last week because I wasn't feeling great. Like I'm still kind of getting over COVID now, but on my channel on Sundays, my friend Mars and I, we talk about our weekly pickups. Last week was a pretty big week, and I went to the comic shop today, got another big week. So we've got a pretty like hefty 2 weeks of books to talk about this Sunday. But we just kind of like casually talk about comic books. We sort of get into like, you know, news and things like that. Yeah. So that's over on the Comics Will Break Your Heart channel. We do a little casually comic Sunday chat.
Nice. I always look forward to, I don't always catch you guys live. I usually have to catch you later, but I always look forward to that. So I'm going to actually be in for a light weekend. I will have the look back video, but I did not do family stuff this last weekend. We do it this weekend because that's when my dad's birthday is. So I'm going to be out and about. So it won't be much coming this weekend from my channel, but next week we'll get back on the thing. And I think next up on the Indie Show is another round of Usagi. Fingers crossed. We never know till the moment we hit live if that's going to happen, but I think we're going to be up to book 6 of the 7 original volumes. So looking forward to that next week. And with that, we're going to get out of here. Go hang out if you want to hear more about comic books on John's channel, and we will catch you guys later. Bye.
Peace.